Dust and dreams, Kabir left before sunrise. No farewell party. No drums. Just dust clinging to his feet and the echo of Akola's silent goodbye. She stood in the distance near the mango tree, wrapped in her old green shawl, eyes dry but full of storms. He didn't wave. If he had, he might have stayed. The road to Kisangani was cruel. Kabir walked for 2 days before he found a lorry willing to take him, half price if he sat with the goats. He didn't care. Every mile away from Mwanga was a mile closer to a future he could give Akola. The city was louder than he'd imagined. Buildings that touched the clouds. Men who wore shoes that clicked like metal. And women who smelled like flowers from places he'd never heard of. But Kisangani wasn't made for dreamers. It chewed them and spit them back out on street corners. For 3 days, he starved. Then came the factory. A cement plant on the edge of the city. Hotter than hell, but it paid. Barely. Kabir worked from dawn to dusk, lifting bricks and mixing powder until his skin peeled and his muscles screamed. The other workers laughed at his accent, at his village rags. He didn't mind. He slept in a storeroom, ate stale bread, and wrote letters to Akola in his head. Back in Mwanga, Akola waited. Each month, a letter came. Sometimes 2. Kabir didn't write beautifully, but his words were honest. He told her about the city, the men, the danger. He told her he was saving every coin, that he'd seen a silver ring in a shop window, one that sparkled like her eyes when she laughed. She would reread his letters at night, her fingers tracing the lines like prayers. But something was changing in Mwanga. A sickness had returned, the same one that took her little cousin the year before. The clinic still had no medicine. Men in white coats came and left, offering promises but no help. And then, one afternoon, as she washed clothes in the river, he came. His name was Tomo. A man from the city, dressed like gold and smelling like smoke. He came with gifts, bags of flour, cartons of soap, bottles of oil. He said he worked for a politician. Said he wanted to build schools. Said he could help, but his eyes followed Akola too closely. At first, she ignored him. But her grandfather had fallen sick. Her younger brothers hadn't eaten meat in weeks. And when Tomo brought medicine, people began to whisper. She must accept him. Why wait for a boy who abandoned the village? She's wasting her beauty on a ghost. Akola stayed strong. For a while, but every day without Kabir's letter felt heavier. Every stare from the villagers a blade. Even Mama Zina, Kabir's mother, fell ill and was taken to a healer in another town. Mwanga had never felt so alone. When Kabir's next letter arrived, Akola didn't open it. She couldn't, because the lion pendant around her neck suddenly felt like a lie. Meanwhile, in Kisangani, Kabir had been promoted to supervisor, unofficially. The factory didn't use titles. But he was respected now. He had saved enough to buy a small ring, not gold, but silver, polished and pure. It took him 2 years. 2 full years of blood, sweat, and dreams stitched together with hope. That he packed his bag the next morning, back to Mwanga, back to Akola, back to the girl who once laughed at his promise and gave him a lion for courage. The journey home felt shorter. When he arrived at the village gates, children ran beside him, chanting his name. Dust rose in celebration. Elders nodded. A neighbor clapped him on the back. "You've become a man," they said, but Akola was not at her grandmother's hut. she was not at the well, she was in the mango grove. Alone, wearing a blue dress Kabir had never seen. When she turned to see him, she didn't smile, she froze, and then she whispered, "You shouldn't have come." Kabir reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with love overflowing. "I promised," he said, and then, she cried, not soft tears, but broken ones, the kind that fall when the soul cannot carry silence anymore. The city's weight. The ring slipped from Kabir's fingers before she even finished weeping. Akola turned her face away, ashamed of the tears she had once sworn she'd never show anyone, not even him. "Akola," Kabir whispered, stepping forward. "Tell me what happened." But the wind carried no answer, only the rustle of mango leaves overhead. It was Mama Odi, the midwife, who finally gave him the truth. She found him sitting under the tree for hours, the silver ring buried in the dust between his feet. She waited, Mama Odi said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Longer than anyone I've seen wait. But we don't eat hope here, child. We eat what we're given." Kabir stared at the horizon, eyes dark. He bought her family food when there was none. Paid for her grandfather's medicine. Promised to build a new house for them. And after months of pressure from everyone, she agreed. But only after your letters stopped coming. Kabir's head jerked. "I never stopped writing." Mama Odi sighed. Then the letters never reached her. Tomo had silenced the postman. Everyone suspected it, but no one dared speak it. He had money, influence, power. The kind that could buy obedience in a village where obedience kept people alive. "She doesn't love him," Mama Odi whispered, "but she fears what will happen if she refuses." Kabir stood then, not like a boy, not even like a man, like something forged in fire. He didn't say another word as he turned away from the mango grove and walked to the market square. People stared. The prodigal son had returned. But what he carried now wasn't joy. It was something heavier. That night, Kabir didn't sleep in his old home. He sat near the dry well, the one his father had dug with bare hands, and whispered prayers to the stars. Not for himself. Not even for Akola, but for the strength to endure, because love was no longer a dream. It was a war. The next morning, the village was buzzing. Tomo had heard that he arrived on a motorbike, wearing a cream suit and sunglasses too large for his face. The children scattered. The elders looked away. But Kabir did not move. They met in front of the mango grove. "City boy," Tomo sneered. "I thought you left Mwanga for good. We were doing fine without you." Kabir didn't blink. "You bought her family. Not her love." "She gave her word," Tomo growled. Kabir smiled, cold, firm. "She also gave me her tears." The crowd gasped. No one spoke to Tomo like that. Not here. Akola arrived moments later, her face pale, her hands shaking. She looked at both men and then at the villagers who had watched her life become currency. "Stop," she whispered. "Please." But it was too late. Tomo stepped forward. "I could make your mother disappear, Kabir. You want that?" Kabir's eyes flared. "Try it." The tension cracked like thunder. But before fists flew, Elder Weeksa raised his staff. "Enough." The old man stepped forward, his legs weak but his voice still thunderous. "No woman is a prize. No love a battle won through threats. He turned to Akola, speak. Akola stepped forward, her voice trembling but growing steadier with every breath. I waited for Kabir, not for weeks or months, but for years. I wrote him letters. He never answered. I thought he left me behind. I said yes to Tomo because I believed there was nothing left. Her eyes found Kabir's. I never stopped loving you. But I am tired. Tired of choosing between pain and duty. Kabir walked to her, then that he opened his palm. The ring, dusty but still shining, lay in the center. I never stopped writing, he said. And I never will. Even if you never wear this ring. Even if all I have left is your tears. I will cherish them. Because they came from your heart. Akola looked at the ring, then at the people, then at Tomo, who turned and stormed away, humiliated, defeated not by fists but by truth, and finally, she wept again, but this time, not from sorrow, from release, from the weight that finally lifted, and Kabir held her, in front of everyone, as the dust danced around them like blessing. The promise and the pain, the promise and the pain. Life in Mwanga didn't change overnight. The sun still rose over cracked roofs. The water well still groaned with thirst. Children still played barefoot in red dust. But something invisible shifted the morning after Akola wept into Kabir's arms. People began to whisper not just about Tomo's departure, but about hope. Akola moved back to her grandmother's hut, refusing the half-built house Tomo left behind. She returned every gift he'd given, even the slippers her brothers begged her to keep. Kabir, meanwhile, sold the silver ring and used the money to buy school books, soap, and a solar lantern for the clinic. That he said it wasn't a sacrifice, that he said she was worth more than silver, but Akola didn't smile the way she used to. Even with Kabir by her side, something inside her had dimmed. One evening, under the mango tree where it all began, Kabir brought her tea in a clay cup. Do you still love me? He asked. Akola didn't answer right away. She looked at the stars instead. I love who you were. I love who you became. But I'm trying to learn how to love myself again. Kabir nodded. I'll wait, he said, even if it takes my whole life. That night, Akola wept silently. Not because she didn't believe him, but because she did, and that frightened her more than anything. The world had broken so many promises around her, she didn't know how to hold a new one. The next few weeks brought unexpected trials. A government inspector arrived, threatening to shut the village well due to unsafe conditions. The only safe well in miles. Kabir confronted him, offered his city contact, even spoke in Kiswahili like the city men did, but the inspector only smirked. Unless you can pay the fee, it closes. The village panicked. Women walked 4 kilometers to fetch water. Children began falling ill. Akola organized the women, marched to the local chief, and demanded justice. She was no longer just a weaver's granddaughter. She was a flame, and when she spoke, people listened. Kabir watched her with awe. She was more than the girl he left behind. She had become the voice Mwanga never knew it needed. Together, they raised funds, sold handmade mats, mango baskets, even beads carved from goat bones. Kabir worked day and night, translating letters, sending emails to old contacts in Kisangani, begging for help, and finally, it came. Not money, not a miracle, but a truck, carrying tools, engineers, and a young woman named Ida from a clean water NGO who said, "Someone in the city told us your village mattered." The well was repaired in 5 days, and Mwanga celebrated with drums, roasted maize, and old songs Akola's grandmother hadn't sung in years. Kabir and Akola stood together near the well that night. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "Not yet." Kabir smiled. "I didn't come for a wedding. I came for you. Whatever you give me, it's already enough." And then, for the first time since he returned, she kissed his cheek, not out of pity, not out of habit, but out of choice, and Kabir felt it deep in his bones. A silent vow. A new beginning. When the rain finally fell, rain hadn't touched Mwanga in 8 weeks, the ground cracked like broken clay pots. The crops withered. Even the animals grew lean, their ribs showing like secrets never meant to be seen. But still, Akola stood tall, now organizing food shares, rationing water, and guiding women to plant seedbeds with what little they had. Kabir remained by her side, silent, supportive, steady. He no longer asked her to marry him. He no longer needed to. Their bond had grown past ceremony, into something sacred. It was in the way she handed him a cloth when he returned dusty from errands, or how he rose each morning to sweep her grandmother's compound before anyone woke. It was felt, not said. One morning, news arrived that Akola's mother, long thought dead, was alive and living in another village with a new family. Akola didn't speak for hours. When night came, she told Kabir the truth under the stars. Her mother had fled years ago after a brutal marriage. Akola had grown up thinking she was unwanted, that her mother abandoned her for an easier life, but now she learned that her mother was beaten nearly to death, then carried away by an ant, too scared to return. "She was broken," Akola whispered, "just like I almost was." Kabir held her hand in silence. Not to fix her pain, but to let her grieve it. The next day, they walked to the nearby village. And when Akola finally saw her mother, wrinkled, thin, but eyes just like hers, no words passed between them. Only tears, the kind only blood understands. Kabir stood back as mother and daughter embraced, and in that moment, Akola forgave the past, not because it asked for it, but because she needed it. Weeks later, rain finally came. A slow drizzle at first. Then a torrent. The earth drank deeply. Children danced naked in the streets. Drums echoed from hut to hut. Laughter, for the first time in months, filled the air like incense. Akola stood in the center of the field, her arms raised to the sky. Kabir watched from the edge, his heart swelling. She turned to him, soaked, smiling, tears and rain mixing on her cheeks. "I'm ready now," she said, and then she did what no one expected. She knelt in the mud and held up the same silver ring Kabir had sold, now returned to her by the village women who saved and bought it back. "Will you marry me?" Kabir dropped to his knees, laughing and crying all at once. "Yes," he said, "but only if you promise to keep leading us." They kissed in the rain, surrounded by cheers, music, and stories that would be told for generations, not about wealth, not about power, but about love that waited, wept, and finally, bloomed, even in the dust, even in the drought, even in a forgotten village called Mwanga. The end.